I thought I was the perfect father doing what was best for my son. When I found those messages on Ryan's phone, I believed I was saving him from a terrible mistake. Looking back now, alone in this empty house with only memories and regrets, I realize I destroyed the very thing I claimed to protect, our family. The cruelty of shaving his head, the humiliation I caused the day I watched him walk away, these moments replay endlessly in my mind. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to face the consequences of your own pride. I grew up in a small Missouri town where everyone knew your business and reputation was everything. My father was a career military man who believed boys became men through discipline and toughness. Any sign of weakness earned his belt, or worse, his disappointment. My mother never contradicted him, standing silently as he toughened me up. I swore I would be different with my own children, but some patterns run deeper than promises. I met Catherine during my second year working at the local manufacturing plant. She was a nurse at the county hospital, gentle where I was rough, patient where I was demanding. Her smile could light up a room, and somehow she saw something in me worth loving. We married after 8 months of dating, and I still remember how beautiful she looked walking down the aisle in her grandmother's restored wedding dress. When Ryan was born 3 years later, I held his tiny body in my calloused hands and made silent promises. I would provide for him. I would protect him. I would raise him to be strong. The first time he gripped my finger with his entire hand, I felt a love so powerful it scared me. Those early years were good ones. Catherine worked part-time while I put in overtime at the plant, eventually working my way up to floor manager. We bought a modest 3-bedroom house on Oakwood Drive, and I spent weekends building a treehouse, teaching Ryan to throw a baseball and fixing up an old Chevy in the garage. Catherine would watch from the porch, lemonade in hand, telling me I was a good father. By the time Ryan turned 10, I noticed things that troubled me. He preferred reading to roughhousing. He showed more interest in his mother's cooking than my automotive projects. When I signed him up for Little League, he spent more time picking dandelions in the outfield than watching for fly balls. Other fathers noticed, making comments that stung my pride. "Boys will be boys," I told Catherine when she said I was pushing him too hard. "The world is tough on men who are soft." She would shake her head and say, "Maybe the world needs more softness, Archer." When Ryan entered middle school, the distance between us grew. He joined the drama club, made friends with artsy kids, and developed a sense of humor that reminded me of Catherine. I tried connecting through hunting trips and football games, but his eyes would glaze over. I convinced myself it was just a phase, that high school would transform him into the son I had envisioned. Catherine saw how Ryan flinched when I raised my voice. She noticed how he checked my expression before speaking. Late at night she would whisper, "You are becoming your father," and I would promise to do better, but by morning my fears would override my intentions. The day everything changed was an ordinary Tuesday in April. Ryan was 17 and 3 months from graduation. I came home early with a splitting headache and went to our bathroom medicine cabinet for aspirin. While searching, I knocked Ryan's phone from the counter where it was charging. The screen lit up with text messages from someone named James. "Miss your face already. Today was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. My heart literally hurts when we're apart." There were photos too. Ryan and a boy I recognized from his drama club, arms around each other, foreheads touching, looking at each other with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, scrolling through months of messages, plans to meet secretly, declarations of feelings, references to kisses stolen behind the auditorium. With each message I felt something inside me hardening, as if concrete were being poured into my chest. When Ryan came home from school, I was waiting in the living room, his phone in my hand. The moment he saw my face, he knew. The color drained from his complexion, and he looked toward the door like he might run. "Sit down," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. "Dad, I can explain," I said. "Sit down." Catherine came in from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Archer, what's going on?" I threw the phone toward Ryan. It hit the coffee table with a crack. "Tell your mother what you've been doing behind our backs." Ryan's eyes filled with tears. His hands trembled as he picked up his phone, checking if the screen had shattered. "I'm waiting," I said. "I'm gay," he whispered so quietly I could barely hear him. "What was that? Speak up like a man if you're going to drop this bomb on your family." He looked up, a flash of defiance in his eyes. "I'm gay, Dad. I've known for years." Catherine moved to sit beside him, putting her arm around his shoulders. "Oh, honey, why didn't you tell us sooner?" I stood up, pacing the living room. "No, this is not happening. Not in my house. Not with my son." Archer, Catherine's voice held a warning. "This is just confusion," I insisted. "You've been spending too much time with those theater kids. That James boy has put ideas in your head." "I loved him before I even knew what it meant," Ryan said, gaining courage from his mother's support. "This isn't something that happened to me. It's who I am." The neighbors must have heard the shouting that followed. I said terrible things, words I can never take back. I called him unnatural, disgraceful, a disappointment. With each word I watched something die in his eyes, but I couldn't stop. It was as if some demon had possessed me, using my voice to hurt my child. Catherine finally stood between us. "That's enough. He's your son, Archer. Nothing has changed about who he is. Everything has changed." I spat back. "And this stops now." The next morning I laid down new rules. Ryan was to quit drama club immediately. His phone would be checked nightly. He was forbidden from seeing James or any of his questionable friends outside of class. I scheduled an appointment with Pastor Mike for counseling to fix this problem. Catherine fought me every step of the way. We had never argued like this in our 18 years of marriage. She threatened to take Ryan and leave, but I reminded her that I was the breadwinner. Where would they go? How would they survive? She stayed, but something broke between us that never fully healed. Ryan became a ghost in our house. He went to school, came straight home, did his homework, and retreated to his room. His eyes, once bright with laughter, now looked hollow. He lost weight. His teachers called with concerns about his participation. I told myself it was necessary discipline, that one day he would thank me for saving him from a difficult life. 2 weeks after the discovery, I came home early again to find Ryan's room empty when he should have been doing homework. Catherine was working a double shift. Furious, I drove around town until I spotted his backpack through the window of a coffee shop downtown. Through the glass, I saw him sitting with James in a corner booth. Their fingers were intertwined on the table. Ryan was smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in weeks. Something savage awoke in me. I stormed into the cafe, grabbed Ryan by his arm, and dragged him toward the door. James stood up, telling me to let go. Other patrons stared. Someone threatened to call the police. "You want to act like a disobedient child? Fine. I will treat you like one," I hissed, as I forced him into the car. At home, I marched him to the bathroom, pulled out my electric clippers, and despite his struggles and pleas, shaved his head down to the scalp. His wavy brown hair that looked just like his mother's, fell in clumps around our feet. "There," I said, as if I had accomplished something important. "Maybe without all this pretty boy hair you will remember who you are supposed to be." Ryan stared at his reflection, tears streaming down his face, hand touching the uneven patches where I had cut too close to the skin. He looked broken, humiliated. But beneath the hurt I saw something else. Something I should have recognized as dangerous. Resolve. Catherine came home to find him sitting silent at the kitchen table, wearing a beanie despite the warm spring evening. When she saw what I had done, she slapped me across the face, the only time she ever raised a hand to me. "How could you?" she screamed. "How could you violate him like this?" "I am trying to save him," I insisted. "No," she said, her voice dropping to an eerie calm. "You are trying to save yourself. Your pride, your reputation. This has nothing to do with what's best for Ryan." The next day at school was brutal. Despite the beanie, everyone could see what had happened. The bullying was immediate. James's parents called, threatening a restraining order. The principal requested a meeting about Ryan's concerning home situation. I refused to back down. In my mind, I was the victim, a father dealing with a rebellious son, a husband undermined by his wife. I believed I was fighting for our family's soul. The final confrontation came 3 days later. Ryan had endured the stares, the comments, and my continued tough love with a strange quietness that should have warned me. That evening he came downstairs with a duffel bag packed. "Where do you think you're going?" I demanded. "I'm leaving," he said simply. "I won't live like this anymore. You're 17. You have nowhere to go." James's parents said I can stay with them until graduation. The idea of my son living with the family of his. I couldn't even think the word boyfriend. Sent me into a rage. "You will stay in this house and follow my rules, or you are no longer my son." I threatened, certain this would end his rebellion. Ryan looked at me with an adult's clarity. "Then I guess I'm not your son anymore." Catherine rushed in from the kitchen. "Ryan, please. We can work this out." He hugged her tightly. "I love you, Mom. This isn't your fault. But I can't stay here. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back," I said, my voice cold with finality. "You will be dead to me." As the words left my mouth, I was certain he would back down. What child chooses homelessness over family? What son rejects his father's protection? Ryan put on his jacket, the one I had given him for Christmas, and walked to the door. He turned one last time, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "I forgive you, Dad. I hope someday you can forgive yourself." The door closed behind him with a soft click that echoed through our suddenly empty home. I was sure he would be back within days. Kids run away to make a point, but real life quickly teaches them how much they need their parents. I kept his room untouched, telling Catherine he would return once he got this nonsense out of his system. But days turned into weeks. Catherine moved into the guest bedroom. She spoke to me only when necessary, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She visited Ryan at James's house while I was at work, bringing him clothes and books, helping him apply for college scholarships. "He's doing well," she would report, though I never asked. "The Millers are kind people." "They're enabling his rebellion," I would respond. Our neighbors treated us differently. Invitations to barbecues stopped. People at church asked pointed questions about Ryan's absence. I held my head high, telling anyone who asked that he had chosen a sinful path and was no longer welcome in our Christian home. Some nodded in agreement. Others kept their distance afterward. 3 months after Ryan left, Catherine developed a persistent cough. The doctor prescribed antibiotics, but it didn't improve. Further tests revealed stage 4 lung cancer that had already spread to her lymph nodes and liver. The prognosis was grim, 6 months at most. "Call him," she begged from her hospital bed after the diagnosis. "Life is too short for this Archer. Please, before it's too late." But my pride wouldn't bend even in the face of her dying wish. "He knows where we live if he wants to apologize." Catherine's decline was swift and brutal. Within 4 months she was bedridden, requiring around-the-clock care. I took family leave from the plant to look after her. During her lucid moments she would talk about Ryan, his childhood, his laughter, his kindness. Never directly asking me to contact him, but making her wishes clear. In her final week, when the morphine kept her mostly unconscious, I finally broke. I found Ryan's number in Catherine's phone and called. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, not apologizing, just informing him of his mother's condition. I called James's parents, who promised to reach him at college. Ryan arrived 3 hours after Catherine passed away. I was sitting by her bed, still holding her lifeless hand, when he appeared in the doorway. His hair had grown back. He looked older, more confident, despite the grief etched on his face. He crossed the room without acknowledging me and knelt beside his mother. The sound that came from him, half sob, half wail, will haunt me until my dying day. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "She asked for you." He didn't respond. He simply held his mother's hand and wept. The funeral was well attended. Catherine had been beloved in our community, both as a nurse and as a friend. Ryan sat in the front row, surrounded by James and his family. I sat alone on the opposite end. When people offered condolences, many hugged Ryan first, then awkwardly nodded at me before moving on. At the cemetery, I watched from a distance as my son placed a white rose on his mother's casket. The sunlight caught on something metallic on his left hand, an engagement ring. James stood beside him, arm protectively around his shoulders. They had a cohort of friends with them, diverse, loving, supportive. a chosen family to replace the one I had destroyed. Ryan left without speaking to me. No angry words, no accusations. Something far worse. Indifference. As if I were a stranger who happened to be at the same funeral. The house was unbearable after that. Catherine's presence lingered in every room, her gardening magazines on the coffee table, her favorite mug in the dishwasher, her perfume on her pillowcase. I would find myself talking to her as if she might answer. One night, while searching for our insurance documents, I found a box in Catherine's closet containing dozens of handwritten letters, all addressed to Ryan, none of them sent. They detailed her illness, her love for him, her regrets about not standing up to me sooner. The final letter, dated just a week before her death, contained a line that broke me. I failed you both by trying to keep the peace instead of demanding justice. Forgive me, my beautiful son, and someday if you can help your father find his way back to the good man I once loved. I drank heavily that night, and many nights after. I missed deadlines at work, snapped at colleagues, and eventually took early retirement when my supervisor suggested I take some time to get my head straight. My siblings called less frequently. Friends stopped checking in. 2 years after Catherine's death, I saw Ryan's name in the local newspaper. He had completed his master's degree in counseling and had returned to our town to work at a new youth center, specializing in support for LGBTQ+ teenagers. The article praised his courage and compassion. There was a photo of him cutting a ribbon at the center's opening, James proudly standing beside him. I cut out the article and placed it in my wallet. Sometimes late at night I would take it out and trace my finger over his face, trying to reconcile this accomplished young man with the boy whose heart I had broken. It took another month of rehearsing before I could write a proper letter to Ryan. I apologized for everything, the haircut, the cruelty, the rejection. I admitted my fear, my ignorance, and my regret. I made no excuses. I asked for nothing except the chance to tell him these things in person. Weeks passed with no response. I drove by the youth center several times but couldn't summon the courage to go inside. Finally, I hired a private investigator to find Ryan's address, a small craftsman house on the other side of town. On a Tuesday morning in October, I parked across the street and waited, unsure what I would say if he appeared. Around 9 a.m., the front door opened. Ryan emerged holding the hand of a small girl, perhaps 4 or 5 years old. She had dark curly hair and was chattering excitedly as he helped her into a car seat. My grandchild, a child I never knew existed. James came out next carrying a lunchbox and travel mug. He handed them to Ryan, then leaned in for a quick kiss. It looked so natural, so normal, this everyday moment between two people who loved each other. The family drove away and I remained in my car, weeping for everything I had willfully blinded myself to. I returned the next day, and the next, watching from a distance, as Ryan lived the life I had tried to deny him, a life full of love, purpose, and joy. On the 4th day, as I sat in my car, a knock on my window startled me. It was James. "This has to stop," he said when I rolled down the window. "It's scaring our daughter." "I just want to talk to him," I said. "You've had years to talk to him. You chose not to." "I've changed," I insisted. James studied my face. "Maybe you have, but that doesn't erase what you did. Ryan is happy now. He has healed despite you, not because of you. If you truly love him, you'll respect his space." He handed me a business card for a therapist. "She specializes in family reconciliation. If you're serious, start there. Ryan will know when you're ready, if he chooses to see you again." I spent 6 months in therapy before Ryan agreed to meet me. The session was facilitated by his own therapist in her office. Ryan sat across from me, poised and guarded. He looked so much like Catherine it physically hurt. "I'm sorry," I began, the words I had rehearsed deserting me. "I was wrong. About everything." Ryan nodded but said nothing. "I thought I was protecting you," I continued, "but I was only protecting my own narrow view of the world. I was cruel and unforgiving, and I lost the best parts of my life because of it." "Why now?" he finally asked. "Is it because Mom's gone? Because you're lonely?" "Partly," I admitted. "Losing your mother showed me how precious family is, and how quickly it can vanish. but mostly because I finally understand how much pain I caused you. Pain you never deserved. Ryan's eyes glistened. You know what hurts the most? You were so sure I would come crawling back. So convinced I couldn't survive without you. You never even considered that I might thrive. You have, I said. I'm proud of you even though I have no right to be. He looked surprised at that. The youth center is helping kids like I was. Some of their parents are like you were. Some are worse. I want to make amends, I said. Not just to you. To all the damage I've done. We talked for the full hour. No dramatic reconciliation. No easy forgiveness. But a beginning tenuous as a spider's thread. In the months that followed, I joined PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. I shared my story as a cautionary tale. I volunteered at Ryan's center, mostly doing maintenance work and staying out of the way. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something between us. Not what we had before, that was lost forever, but something new. The first time I met my granddaughter properly was at a neutral location, a park with an ice cream stand. She called me Mr. Archer instead of Grandpa, and that was fine. I had not earned the title yet. She had Ryan's eyes and Catherine's laugh. Last week, Ryan invited me to dinner at their home, the first time I'd been inside. On their mantel was a photo of Catherine holding Ryan as a baby. Next to it was a family portrait of Ryan James and their daughter. I realized that was my legacy now. Not commanding respect through fear, but earning it through humility and growth. True fatherhood, I finally understood, is not about controlling your child's path. It's about loving them enough to support their journey, even when it differs from what you imagined. My rigid beliefs cost me years with my son, a relationship with my daughter-in-law, and my wife's final months of happiness. Some damages can never be fully repaired. Ryan will always carry the scars of my rejection. Trust, once shattered, never quite reforms the same way. But healing is still possible even amidst the sharpest regrets. If my story resonates with you, I hope you make different choices than I did. Have you ever had to reconsider deeply held beliefs for someone you love? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing this journey from pride to redemption, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Remember that love, real love, makes room for people to be who they truly are. Thank you for listening, and may you have the wisdom I lacked when your own moments of truth arrive.